Hi, everyone. Today I have the incredible joy of speaking with Miss Flo Wilson. She began her acting career at the age of 21. Flo has had an extensive career in theater. She has appeared in The Frogs, The Visit, and Small Island at the National Theatre, The Tempest and Henry V at the Shakespeare Rose Theatre, York, Oliver Twist at Hull Truck as the first Black female Fagin, a woman of no importance at the Leeds Theatre, and The Secret Garden at York Theatre Royal. She has appeared in Jellyfish and Lobster, a BAFTA-winning performance, Coronation Street, The Peter Kay Thing, The Mill, Emmerdale Farm, Death in Paradise, Moon, and of course, as the amazingly loving Mrs. Wheatley on Sanditon. Other work includes several radio plays with BBC Four. Audio is off. There
Is
you
that,
go.
yeah, but I'm upright. I'm getting
I
there.
can hear you now. Hello.
Oh,
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good.
On behalf of myself and the Sanditon fandom, I really, really want to thank you for joining me today. The ladies are going to be so thrilled that you said yes. This is a big surprise for them. So,
I'm really excited.
oh, that's awesome. So I would like to know when you initially decided that you wanted to be a performer.
Oh, well, that was, I suppose I was about 17, 18, but I was at college and I actually wanted to be a sound engineer.
Oh,
And but I was on this drama course and every time my fellow students were doing performances, I would be there sort of either lighting or sound because that's what I was interested in. But during that, when we had breaks, I was always sort of messing about, being the sort of the joker of the group, making everybody laugh because I just loved doing that. And there was an audition at a company, theatre company, and my tutor told me I should go and apply. I should go and audition, and I was like, oh, I don't want to be an actor, you know. She was "You're really good. You should do it." And she pretty much sort of held me up in the corridor and said, "You should go for this audition, Florence." And I went, oh, "Okay." And you know, when you're 17, you don't really know anything about anything. I went for the audition, and I got the job. And then I pretty much never looked back because I've been working. Um, no, I was 20, so I've been working ever since, and I'm still in touch with my tutor, and we're still good friends. So anytime I see her, I say any of my successes I give to her because it was her who sort of encouraged me to sort of go down
that's
this.
incredible. Thank goodness she pushed you, or else, who knows what would have happened. That's interesting because my grandson is into, well, he plays bass guitar, but he does the sound for all of the school plays in high school right now. So maybe he's on the same path. We'll have to see. Uh, so um it seems like you started out primarily in theater.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
10 years straight was just theatre. So I'd say from I was 20 to 30, it was just theatre. And then after round about 30, I'd got married and I was having my first child. And I realised that in theatre, because you're touring,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be away from home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when my son, Tom, was about 3 months old, I'd got another theatre job, but this was in London. And that
Okay.
I would have been away from home for 9 months.
Oh my goodness.
So what my husband was doing is that he'd put John in the back of the car and we'd drive down to London and he would stay with me. And that was the only chance I'd got to see my son because I only had a day off because we worked Saturday, so you only had Sundays off. So to travel all that way,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much 500 miles to go home just to see my child, I'd have to be leaving the same day.
Oh
So that's
God.
so that's
Yeah.
why my husband came, and then afterwards I thought I can't do theatre and look after
And be
Tom.
a mom. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
when I started going into television because at least it was a day or
Mm-hmm.
maybe 2 days that I'd be away from him. But so that's when I started going into television.
You had some very impressive roles in theater. The list, I'm not sure if I was able to include them all in the intro or not, but the list is quite impressive. And how was it to be Fagin?
I loved it. Also because it was costume drama, and I just love costume in the sense
Costume.
of the period. But it was great. The singing, the way I could play Fagin was more of a like mother figure.
Hmm.
She seems really nice and sort of caring and nurturing of these young boys that are sort of like orphans on the street. But basically, to make a living, she makes them go out and work
And
and steal.
pickpocket.
So it's like, yeah, she's a mother figure, but you can't mess with her. She seems to be quite dangerous as well. So I think that was kind of nice that the image of Fagin was sort of like, oh no, she seems quite nice. And then later on you go, no, she's not
No, she's
nice.
not nice at all.
But she uses her charm to sort of, get away with
Yes.
things.
Yes, that's great. So which television role was the your first television role? Was it Coronation Street?
No, I've got so much to my CV. I didn't give you all of it because it was
Right.
just too long. No, I played a neighbour in a police drama. Oh Lord, I'm trying to. This is 40 odd years ago, so I'm trying to remember the name. And if anything, I had my daughter Billy, so that was my second child, in it. So I was just a sort of neighbour going, "Yes, it was over there. The accident happened." You sort of got a
Hmm.
couple of lines, and that was my first time in television. And I remember the director was saying, "Oh, you don't have to speak so loud because obviously everything's right." And I'm still doing it like theatre. I'm going, "Yes, he's over there. Find it." No, you can bring it down. So yeah, that was my first learning about, no, you don't have to project like you do on stage for television because it's all mic'd, Florence. So it's like, okay. So yeah, that was my first television and first learning um, memory. It was great. It was great.
I honestly think the first thing I saw you in was I thought I had seen you in an episode of Silent Witness. I think or it was a police you were a lawyer. You didn't speak at all, but you were a lawyer. It might not have, because I've just indulged in so much British since I got Acorn TV that, but I know I saw you as, and then I did see you in Death in Paradise.
Yes, yes, that was during the COVID times. What had happened is the TV companies couldn't, or were putting a hold on employing actors who were 70 and over because of the
Because of COVID.
yeah, and they were at high risk. So they were starting to look for actors who were younger, who could maybe play that age.
Hmm.
So and I'd done lots of sketches where I've always been playing characters that are a lot older than me. And so I sent them a self tape and they said yes. So when I went over there, they'd sort of like put a lot, just added a bit more to my grey because I've already got grey hair.
Hmm.
And then I played was it Deloise, I've forgotten her name now. And I played her in Death in Paradise, and that was so much fun. It was so much fun. Yeah, yeah. I had a great time. I had a great time.
It looks like an excellent location to go to film. It just looks so serene.
It was, and also because it was during COVID, most people were not out. Everybody was in, so I had a little sort of chalet near the
Hmm.
beach, but there was nobody occupying any of the chalets except other actors. But because you're not necessarily on set at the same time, I
Hmm.
would be at my chalet and everybody else would be at work, and then I'd get called in later. And so, yeah, it was beautiful to be there, but sort of so surreal to not see anybody like at the bar or people walking along the beach or just sitting down. So, yeah, it was beautiful, but sort of a bit scary in the sense of the lack of people.
Yeah,
So,
human contact.
yeah.
So on, how did you hear about the role for Sanditon? Did your agent reach out to you, or was there already um
It was my agent.
it was
They
your
just sent me the information and said, would you like to do a self tape for this? And I was like, going, it's Jane Austen, yes. So I sort of like tried to make myself sort of like I tied my head to sort of give it the idea of a bonnet,
Mhm,
and then my husband. It was the scene where Charlotte has left the house, but that Alexander really wanted her to stay, but he's been quite stubborn. And it's when
mhm.
Mrs. Wheatley asks him for the money because she placed a bet, and um,
That was a great scene.
so that's what I had to do for
Mm,
a self tape and send
mhm.
it to them, and they said yes, and so I got the part based on what I did for that scene. So, but that, yeah,
So as a fan of the show, and this is several other people, but this is mainly what I felt was that Mrs. Wheatley was the catalyst for the whole relationship starting. Um, I I feel that way. If you had not ever said anything to her when she showed up at the house, the job would have never come about.
mm,
So how do you, did you interpret it the same way?
yes, yes, I did, because I think Mrs. Wheatley felt that Alexander had been on his own too long. He needed to sort of get back out there into the world. And I think when Charlotte sort of knocked on the door, I think, yes, Mrs. Wheatley was quite sort of brusque with her. But I think the fact that she was saying, "Oh, they don't have a governess." I'm thinking, well, why would she say to us, total stranger who's come to the door, that the girls who are being a bit sort of unruly don't have a governess? And I'm thinking, she was thinking, well, if you seem that concerned about them to come all the way to the house to inquire, I'm going, oh, she's got a caring nature. And I think she dropped that as a hint of, well, they don't have a governess, and to see what would happen. And so when she knocked on the door, I think inside Mrs. Wheatley's going, yeah, okay, this could work, this could work. So yeah, that
Eventually, yes, through a lot of angst, it did finally work out. Um, and again, as fans, the relationship between Mrs. Wheatley and Alexander is a very caring, loving relationship, almost motherly.
yes.
Did they give you a backstory as to that? Because that's the way that it translated on screen,
I had a bit of a backstory, and then I sort of added
added the
to it.
rest.
And the backstory was that Mrs. Wheatley came to work for Alexander's father when she was probably around 14. So she would have just been a maid, cleaning out the grates and helping in the kitchen and doing all the sort of hard manual jobs. But she was getting paid because she wasn't a slave, and this was
Hmm.
employment. And I think she's just stayed in the house. Obviously, when uh, Alexander and his brother were born, then when Alexander's mother died, I think if anything, she was always there, sort of helping out. Not a nanny, because I don't think she would have been like qualified to sort of do
Hmm.
that. But I think she's always been helping out with the boys. So watched them grow up, especially Alexander. And then I think when because their mother had passed by this time, and when their father died, and the elder brother left, instead of taking on the responsibility of the house, it fell to Alexander. And so, if anything, she's just always been there to sort of help, guide. And I think it was in my idea is that it was Alexander who eventually made her housekeeper. Um, so I think their relationship is definitely sort of like mother son. Mrs. Wheatley feels very motherly towards him and cares about him, and but when they're in public, her relationship with him is very professional. She's just the housekeeper. She would never call him Xander in any other company. But she has that kind of relationship with him that she can talk to him about anything and tell him how she feels and what he should be doing. But she does
Which
that in
thank
a
God she does.
because I think she thinks he can be his own worst enemy at times because of his
hmm
being stubborn.
hmm hmm
Um, so yes, that's she cares about him.
That
Yes.
scene, I think the most heartbreaking scene is when he's looking out, when he has sent Charlotte away and he's looking out the window, and your character comes in, you put your hand on his shoulder and you tell him that he's making a mistake. I think that in that scene we all felt like this cannot be the end of this, and Mrs. Wheatley knows best here, and boy, you should be listening to her. Is the way that we felt as fans at that point. Um, so when I had a chat with Flora Mitchell, adorable young lady,
She is.
and she said, I asked about the relationship between Leo and Mrs. Wheatley, and she said in her mind it was like an aunt niece kind of thing, like that you two um were kind of like being a little sneaky behind the scenes of like trying to get Charlotte and Alexander together. So do you feel that Mrs. Wheatley and Leo had that kind of relationship also?
Definitely, definitely. I think because Mrs. Wheatley wasn't sort of bothered about her dressing in a dress because Leo was up in trousers and all that kind of thing, and Mrs. Wheatley is so fond of her and thinks no, she's all right. Leave her as she's great. Um, if anything, I think Mrs. Wheatley allowed herself to be slightly manipulated by Leo because when they came into the kitchen to sort of like talk about how they could get Charlotte and Alexander together, and Mrs. Wheatley's going, oh well, I don't really know if that could happen, sort of thing, and they're sort of egging her on, and I'm thinking it was really nice that they were all on the same page, which was they knew that Alexander should be with Charlotte because he was just a better person when she was around. So that's why they went, it's obvious they should be together. He's not recognizing it, but everybody else did. And
Right.
it was nice, that sort of little like family conspiracy of how to get them together because, and that was nice. I loved that.
It was great in that scene where when they first come back and Augusta is serving the cake in the first episode of series 3, I think it is, and Augusta is serving the cake, and they're discussing what kind of a person Alexander is looking for Augusta to marry, and then she's just basically describing Charlotte, and Mrs. Wheatley gives that little side eye of, because she knows. So at that,
Yeah,
you guys were all on the same page at that point, and that was, and you are so expressive um in your acting that even when Mrs. Wheatley wasn't saying anything, we knew what she was thinking, because you are very expressive in your acting, which is awesome.
thank you. But
So, oh, I'm sorry. So, when in series 2, the end of series 2, when Alexander, Charlotte, and Augusta return from the ball, when Leo is like, she comes booking around the corner, and you follow behind her because you're kind of like in a loving way, you're kind of like reprimanding her for not being in bed, for not, staying in
yeah,
bed. And you see Charlotte at the door. The expression on your face is one of pure shock. Um, I'm assuming that that is something that Mrs. Wheatley obviously was not expecting, but she was very happy to see Charlotte standing beside Alexander in that moment. Is that yes?
yes, because they'd sort of, I mean, they weren't in a relationship, but because she'd left the house, it felt like the relationship was over. So the fact that Alexander went to ball, Mrs. Wheatley wouldn't necessarily know if Charlotte was going to be there, but obviously hoping that she was. But the fact that she'd come back to the house, it just went, oh, it's like, she's here, she's actually here. And it's like, okay, keep it cool, keep it cool, you know. And so she was pleased that she was there, that
Mhm.
something has happened for them to travel back together. And she was hoping maybe it would, you know, so she was shocked but pleased because she'd not been in the house. I don't know how long, I can't really work out time wise how long she'd been away from the house, because don't forget they had left as well in at the end of season 2. They'd left the house to go to London, so the whole thing had been, the house had been shut down. So I don't know if it could have been 6 months or maybe even longer before Charlotte and Alexander had met up again. So she was really pleased that she was at the house.
In the speaking of series 3 episode 1, I actually had a chance to speak with the 2 supporting actors that were in that scene with you, and I just want to pass on to you from John Ninnis and Alana Southerton how much they absolutely loved working with you and Ben and the girls. um Alana said it was the best time ever, and that you were all so gracious and um oh, what's the word that I can't remember, but generous with your time with them, because most times essays are kind of like in the background, and
Yeah.
nobody felt like that on the set of Sanditon.
Well, I'm glad, I'm pleased about that, because I'm working with them, so I'd like to know the people that I'm working with, and for me, it doesn't matter the so-called status of
Mm-hmm.
how the theatre. For me, it's sort of like, no, they're here, they're working in a scene with me, so we'll talk, get to know them, and yeah, because it's better, because for me, I felt that if Mrs. Wheatley ran this house and knows these people as her staff,
Mm-hmm.
then I've got to know them. Otherwise, it's not going to come up. You know what I mean? It's one thing just giving orders, but I don't think Mrs. Wheatley just gives orders. I
Right.
think she talks to her staff, and I think that's you know, it's like, we need to do this, and as opposed to just the finger pointing, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's Mrs. Wheatley.
Yeah,
So that's why,
the snapping of the finger and the
yeah, and you know, sending people to go and do. I don't think that's not Mrs. Wheatley, because that's where she came from. She
mm-hmm.
started in the house doing all the menial
Mm-hmm.
manual jobs, carrying water and all that kind of thing. So she can look at these people and go, I have been exactly where you have been, but maybe Mrs. Wheatley wasn't spoken to as nicely, but maybe she's decided that's not how I'm going to run this house.
Right,
So
right. That's awesome. They did say that in the scene where John is opening up the carriage when they first arrived and they were standing outside and John had to open up the carriage, that it was quite chilly that day.
yes, yes, I had a lot of lights to make it look like the sun was shining, but it was cold.
Oh my goodness. So let me see. Oh, in series 3, when you run it, when they come back and nobody knows that they're back in town yet, Mrs. Wheatley and the girls are in town, and you run into Charlotte and Lady Susan, and you have that conversation, and and as fans, we've kind of determined that when somebody says the house, like the house misses you, that it's basically referring to Alexander. Is
Yes,
that
yes,
yes?
yes. Because obviously Mrs. Wheatley wants her to know this, that she wants her to know that Alexander isn't angry with her. He misses her, but obviously she can't say that in public.
Right,
It's kind of, it's not her place to say that anyway. But
right.
that's why she can say the house is missing you, and give you the look and say, "Do you understand what I'm saying? The house is missing you." So it's like, putting the ball in her court, as it were. So it's just letting her know that everything's good on this side. So, you know,
So how are things on your side? But
how things on
poor
your
thing,
side.
poor Mrs. Wheatley did not know at that point that she was engaged to, the
Yeah.
farmer Ralph Stalling, which definitely was not a good fit for her. Um, he just did not have, she needed, because she was um she was better read than he was. She was better educated than he was. And making Charlotte just a farmer's wife just would have not.
Yeah.
And that would have never worked out in an Austen book anyway.
Or Charlotte would just have been miserable for the rest of her. Like, I mean, she would have loved him, but not been in love with him. So it would have
Right,
been, but it would have, she would not have been happy. She would have
right.
tolerated it, and yeah, yeah,
Now that scene where Alexander and Augusta, when Augusta and Leo kind of worm the invitation out of um oh my God, I'm going with Georgiana for the invitation to her birthday party. And um Alexander says to Mrs. Wheatley, "How do I look?" And you say to him, which was awesome, you very rarely get a second chance. And you're, straightening out. And then the next scene that we see is you and Flora sitting on the stairs. And I'm sorry, Leo is discussing Charlotte as her mother.
yes.
How difficult and how long did it take to do that scene? Because there was a lot of emotion in that scene.
There's a lot of emotion, but it actually didn't take long. I think it was probably between 20 minutes and half an hour, if that.
Wow.
Um, I think because Flora had it down perfect in the sense of the emotional state that her character was in when she's talking to Mrs. Wheatley, and it was just magical doing that scene on the steps. So yeah, but it did not take long at all.
It's a beautiful scene. It's a beautiful scene, and you can definitely feel the relationship vibe in that scene between Mrs. Wheatley and Leo. It definitely came through on screen to everybody. Um, we were I'm one of the in the US, we get it on PBS Masterpiece, and you could actually sit down and binge it. So I was like, in a day, I had seen the whole thing because I was like, I really want to see them married. But there was a lot of, and I'm embarrassed to tell you how many times I have watched it. The the
If you
series
love it,
from end
if
to
you love it,
end.
then you watch it. I mean, I'm the same with so many. I'm thinking I've watched so many films like about 20 times because I just love certain things about it. So yeah, I understand that if you really love something like that, I'm quite happy to watch it again because you always discover new things that you didn't
Every
pick up the
time.
first time. This is what I find every time you're there going, I never noticed that. Like in the background, the way somebody's looking, it's suddenly going,
Hmm.
yes, it reinforces what I thought about something else. So yeah, yeah, I
Right.
watch things.
Every time that I have prepared for a chat, because I think I've spoken with probably 10 of the supporting actors, um and Charlotte's writing double, actually I spoke with her also. So I watch it from end to end to make sure that I'm not asking any stupid questions. So, but and then I just watch it for fun after I talk to him and go, oh, I need to go check out that scene that we just talked about. So it's embarrassing how many times I've seen it, but I'm not going to stop.
Don't be embarrassed.
So we have heard through the grapevine that Mr. Ben loves singing show tunes. Were you privy to any of his performances between takes? No?
No, I wasn't, and I didn't even know he was into show tunes until till you sent me the question which it was on, because I would have asked him to sing something. I seriously would. So, but no, I didn't know.
Now you know, if we get more Sanditon, you're gonna have to ask him to sing you some show tunes.
Definitely, definitely.
We did see a behind the scenes shot. they were in the church. Everybody was in big bulky jackets, and they were in the church, and they were singing a Christmas carol, and it was Ben, it was Emma, um it was Alice Orr Ewing, and I can't remember if Ed was in it or not, but they were actually singing a Christmas carol. So we were privy to that. They had, I can't remember if PBS shared it, but somebody had shared it.
Oh,
So I will see if I can find it, and if I can find it, I will send it to you.
yes, please. Yes, please.
So you were able to work with most of the cast. And they were people were in and out of Hyde Park, plus, in town, the shooting party. Who do you think was the prankster of the set?
I'm not sure because there was never any pranking going on our set because I was mostly at the house,
Mm-hmm.
um, and all the other scenes. If the scene didn't happen in the house, then I didn't really get a chance to mix with any of the other actors unless we
Oh,
were
okay.
just walking on the promenade.
Mm-hmm.
So I only really had the family, and whereas everybody was quite relaxed, I didn't see anybody trying any jokes or any pranks. So, which is a shame because I would have loved to have seen what they would have done. But no, unfortunately, I wasn't in the group where that was happening, so I didn't get to see that.
Okay. Flora said that Liam was a lot of fun to work with because I guess he has children around her age. So the two of them would he would keep her entertained in between scenes,
Yes.
which just sounds awesome. So can you tell me which was your favorite scene and which was the most difficult to do?
Well, I think my favourite was definitely Leo on the stairs, um, because it was just it, you got to see Leo in the sense of how concerned she is about her father, and you normally don't get to see that. You just sort of see her sort of like just out and about, sort of just playing. But
Hmm.
you actually get to see a side where she's actually quite caring and she's quite observant about what's going on, and then the possibility of maybe having a mum. And suddenly you saw her world has the potential of opening up, but she's also so scared because that's what she wants. But if it doesn't happen, it would just you just knew her heart would break if
Hmm.
that didn't happen.
Hmm.
And so when you've got Mrs. Wheatley talking to it, Mrs. Wheatley wants the same thing, but then has to sort of say, like, well, don't hope too much because it may not happen. But even though Mrs. Wheatley's going, I really want it to happen as well. And it was, yeah, I think that was yeah, it was a lovely scene where you just saw them with their guard down and they could just be
Right,
themselves,
right.
talking about how they feel about um, a person they both love and how they want the best for them. So yeah, I think that was definitely my favourite. The difficult scene, which is really weird, there was a time when Charlotte and Alexander were outside in the grounds, and there was a moment where I think they're either going to kiss, and then Mrs. Wheatley comes round the corner to. I don't know if I don't know if Leo was gone missing then or.
Leo was missing. Yes.
Um, so it was the timing of me coming round the corner, which was just before they had the kiss, and it was like, no, you're gonna have to walk a bit further back, Florence, and then start, and then come in. No, and then it was just trying to work out how we could do it because I was walking uphill as well, so I couldn't walk as fast as they wanted me to, and it was just so it was only difficult in the technical of sort of like trying to get there before they
Hmm.
kissed, and so but yes, and because I couldn't hear as well because I didn't have so I had to have somebody waving to go because they could. It was more technical difficulty
Technical
than.
than that. Yes. Okay. There was there was, when we saw it on film, they were actually when Mrs. Wheatley came around the corner, they were actually kissing when Mrs. Wheatley came around the corner. And it was and the two of them, when you say, Mr. Colburn, and they separate at that point. I'm on screen, to us, it looked like you caught them kissing. Like there was something in your heart that was like, oh, poop. I just,
And yeah, because I wasn't sure if Mrs. Wheatley was supposed to see them kissing, because the way I've been playing it is that it was just before, so she wasn't supposed to have seen it. So
Mhm.
so, but because obviously if she did, she'd be really pleased. But then at the time that Leo's missing, it would have been a bit.
Right. It's,
I'm sort of happy for you,
yes,
but I'm not
an
happy for
up
you
and a
because
down.
Leo's. Yeah. So I think they were saying that Mrs. Wheatley didn't see the kiss. But
Obviously Mrs. Wheatley knew the whole issue between Alexander and Lennox.
yes,
So when it was discovered that Leo had overheard that conversation, um, Charlotte turns and looks at you, and the expression on your face is like, oh my God, she heard, she knows at that point. So again, very expressive in your acting. It was, you looked heartbroken that she had discovered the truth, which,
yeah,
thankfully in the next scene, he had probably the only right thing he had ever done in his life was tell her that he wasn't her father. um that was a great scene too, in the camp. um she was awesome in that scene.
yes.
Um, I asked her if that was difficult to film, and she was like, "No, it was just she's just she's awesome." So the relationship that Mrs. Wheatley has with Samuel is a lot different, obviously, than the relationship that she has with Alexander. But the relationship that she has with Samuel kind of seems a little bit more playful than it is with Alexander. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
I think because um, in my thinking of trying to sort of piece together a backstory that would help, it's that when Samuel left after his father died, it's because he was not mature enough to take on the responsibility of running the house and the estate. And I think because he didn't want to do it, and he's sort of like, that's I think that's always his way, to sort of like, yeah, yeah, sort of like, well, I'll get onto it, but that's not where his head is at. So I think Mrs. Wheatley sees him as that. He's good, he's good natured, but he doesn't really want to take on the responsibility of the administration of an estate and everything else. That's
Mhm,
just not him. So because she accepts him for what he is, she's not going to be saying to him, well, you should be doing what Alexander should be free to
mhm.
um, live his life, and you should be doing this. But she knows that's the way he is. So yeah, she's all right with it, because she's there to look after Alexander, and he's fine. He gets on all right. But it's nice that he's come back to the house, because if anything, she never thought she would see him again.
Come back
So
to the
when he
house.
turns up,
There's a scene where Lady Susan has left. She's on her way back to London, and she changes her mind. She comes back, and you come into the room. Samuel is pretty forlorn at that point. He's staring into the fire, and you come into the room, and Lady Susan is behind you, and and I'm not sure what was going on at the time, what they told you, but you have an expression on your face like you're not really pleased that Lady Susan is there. Um, were was it because she had hurt him and left, or because you didn't think that the two of them belonged together?
I think it's because she'd hurt him,
Mm-hmm.
and regardless of that, Samuel had sort of left his responsibilities. His heart is in the right place. He's not a cruel man. He's not a mean man. um, So if anything, Mrs. Wheatley was just upset that she'd hurt him.
Mhm.
And so the fact that she'd come back to the house, I think she was also hoping that things could be resolved. Um, but yeah, she was upset with her because it was a bit, and also because she was having a relationship with the king as well. So she did,
Mhm.
as far as Mrs. Wheatley's concerned, she doesn't know how serious she is for Samuel, or whether or not she's just playing with his heart.
Mhm.
So, there's that concern as sort of like mothering thing, as sort of like, are you just leading them down the path? You're going to be wasting his time. You're going to break his
Mhm.
heart. So if anything, her concerns are that, but obviously she can't really say anything because it's not her place. So
Yes, yes. The scene, and I'm sorry if I didn't send this to you when I sent the questions, but it just popped into my head. The scene where Samuel and Alexander come rushing into the house. At this point, Augusta has left with Denham. When they come rushing into the house asking if Augusta is there, Leo knows where Augusta is, but Mrs. Wheatley did not know
mm,
what she had said. So she seemed quite shocked in that moment. And she had, a very concerned reaction to that. Did they set you up for that? Did they, plan that out with you, that Mrs. Wheatley had absolutely no idea what was going on, but Leo
yeah.
did?
I knew in the reading of the script that
Mm-hmm.
Leo knew and Mrs. Wheatley didn't. So I just had to play that she didn't know. And if anything, she would have just been wondering why Leo wouldn't have told her. Um, but if she was asked to keep a secret, she can also understand the sort of loyalty
Mm-hmm.
to a cousin of keeping a secret. But Leo doesn't know the full details of what danger she would have been in. She would have
Mm-hmm.
just been keeping a secret.
Mm-hmm.
So Mrs. Wheatley couldn't get angry with her, but she was really shocked and concerned because it's sort of like um, Alexander's wife all over again.
Ah, yes.
Because obviously Mrs. Wheatley would have been aware of Alexander's wife speaking to forgot his name,
Lennox.
to Lennox, because she was housekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
So she may not say a lot, but she knows exactly what's going on in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's what she was seeing as happening again, and it happens to be with the same person
Mm-hmm.
who she always knows is a bad penny. So
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that's why
Because
she.
you warn, when you're in town, you warn her when she literally, when Denham runs into her and her book drops, you warn her at that point to stay
Yeah,
away from him. So you like the backstory, the Denham backstory, which is there's a lot of debate in the group on whether or not he has redeemed himself, but he did some pretty nasty
yeah,
things. I was
yes,
gonna
and,
say.
and, and because
Yeah.
of it, she's saying just stay away. But the thing is, it's really weird because obviously she's telling her to stay away, but she can't tell her why. So obviously that just makes her go, "Oh, well, it's just an adult spoiling my fun," sort of thing, and not,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, um, but yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
because she's very strong-willed also. Augusta is very strong, and Mrs. Wheatley knows that. And I think the scene in the kitchen where when on Charlotte's first day, when she's looking at the embroidery where she did spinster, and Mrs. Wheatley says she dropped a stitch. You're like, no, that Mrs. Wheatley is like not messing around yet. She knows
yeah,
exactly who Augusta is.
yes, yes, and does not allow herself to get wound up by it. But she's
Hmm.
also trying to teach Charlotte that and saying, "Look, doesn't matter what she says here. You know what I mean? You can't let her show that it affects you, otherwise."
Hmm.
Your life is going to be over because you'll be doing lots of little things to annoy her. So
Right, right.
I think, yeah, that's why she
Yeah.
just doesn't even look at it and just goes, "No, dropped a stitch." Because I think, because I can imagine that was happening with Mrs. Wheatley. She was always doing something
Right.
because she didn't want to. And it's like, how do you approach it? It's like, okay, I'm not going to rise to it. I'm not going to allow you to annoy me that much that I'm going to, because then she would have won. So
It's amazing how much the relationships progressed from, and I know that you folks filmed back to back, so it uh, you didn't see it the same way that we saw it, as you know, where we had to wait a year for the next one to come out. But the relationships progressed to much more relaxed and loving. Not that you weren't all loving in the series two, but when series three came around, the relationships, and I'm assuming due to Charlotte's influence, were a little bit more easy than they were in the second one. The girls were not, because Augusta could be a little bit obnoxious. Um,
yes,
but she seemed much more mature
yes,
in series three. And she had um not that she didn't have a good relationship with Mrs. Wheatley in the second series, but she had a deeper relationship with Mrs. Wheatley in series three.
yes,
I feel that she
yes,
did anyway. Yes.
yes. Because
So everybody,
she would talk, because it was that scene in the kitchen when Leo and Augusta came to talk about Charlotte and Alexander, which was a sort of a bit surprising for Mrs. Wheatley. But you know, and they sort of knew that Mrs. Wheatley felt the same. So obviously that had been, even if it wasn't spoken out loud, the fact that they could come to her and go, well, look, well, you know, I mean, she's here and she could be, and Mrs. Would go, oh, I'm just doing my chores. I'm not really paying attention. And they're going, but it was that kind of conspiracy, that lovely sort of family conspiracy, which was really nice. And the fact that you saw Augusta doing that, because she was smiling and she was encouraging Leo in the same thing, and they were talking about it. It was, yes, you saw a more gentler, uh, humour-filled, sort of loving Augusta, as opposed to one just being angry and not wanting to be there. So
yeah.
she'd come to terms with the fact that this is where she's going to live. So, and now she's making the best of it, and she's having an enjoyable time because this is her family. She's actually finding that it is her family. When beforehand, I think in episode 2, it was like, well, my family's dead. I've just got to stay here.
Yeah, that scene in the carriage.
Yeah, it was definitely. I'm living here, but this is not my home, and I don't really
Hmm.
like anything about it. But a year sort of later, what you see is that she's gone, no, no, this is my home, and these people do care about me and do love me, and so yeah, that was nice to see that change.
That's that's awesome. It did there was the transition was just seamless and it and natural. And so everybody in the cast did an amazing job. Obviously we were focusing a lot of attention on Charlotte, Alexander, Mrs. Wheatley, Augusta, Leo, you know, that whole family unit that we were craving and praying for. So we scrutinized, as fans, we scrutinized every single solitary thing that was happening, going, yes, this is an indication that it's gonna work. And so
Yeah.
guys did an excellent, amazing job. So do you have anything that you're working on currently that you would like to share with us, that you have coming up?
I'm in a soap that's called Emmerdale,
Okay.
here, and I've been there a year now. So I'm playing an older character who's in her 70s,
Oh my
and
goodness.
I'm the vicar of this small village. I basically turned up unexpectedly, and basically sort of making my son's life slightly difficult with parishioners, because she's a bit of a outspoken woman, not necessarily how can I say it? She doesn't she steps on toes. She doesn't
Uh,
realize it. So if she says
mhm.
something, you know, she'll be going, oh, this is a bit dirty in here, and somebody be like, they may have spent the whole morning cleaning something and left a cup, but the way my character speaks about it, she, you know, she can be a bit rude. But in the years, she's mellowed out. She's mellowed out. She's having a bit of fun. She's smiling more. But beforehand, she went in. She's sort of like very stern and sort of, you know. And suddenly, because her son is in his 50s, she's turned up at his house, and suddenly she's talking to him like he's 12. Well, you can't leave your shoes here. You're going to have to pick them up. And he's a grown man with his own house and a job. And his mum's sort of like, you know. But yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Typical mom. But I would be remiss if I did not congratulate you on your BAFTA.
Thank you. Thank you.
I actually, I watched it through BritBox. They put the BAFTAs on. So I was like, oh my God, it's there she is. There's Mrs. Wilson. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you. It still hasn't quite sunk in, but yeah.
So I ask everybody this. Obviously, with your permission, we are going to post this to our YouTube channel, our Facebook, our Instagram, and our Twitter account with your permission.
Yes.
Okay. And if we are successful in our campaign to get more Sanditon, would Mrs. Wheatley love to be there?
Mrs. Wheatley would love to be there. Love to be there. Yes, definitely.
Bunch of little Colborns running around.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, yes, because there was a little baby Colborn at the end of season
Yes.
3. So, yeah, maybe there might be more by that time if they decide to do that.
Yes, yes. That is our number one goal, is getting more Sanditon. Because we just loved it so much. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I want to thank you very, very much for joining me today and for chatting with me. You have no idea how much I appreciate this and how much I've been looking forward to this and the rest of my admins. So we are going to, I'm not going to take up any more of your time, but I really did have fun with this conversation, and thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it too, and I'm not as scared as I was, because I was like so nervous, because I'm thinking I don't want to. Yeah, it's just, you know, I just didn't want to do anything wrong. I really wanted it to be lovely for you, and I wanted to say thank you for making me feel so relaxed. And
Oh,
so,
you're
yeah,
welcome.
I just felt like, oh, this is just a really nice, lovely conversation. So thank you very much
Yes.
for making me feel at ease. And yes, I'm really excited for this, for the Sanditon fan group. But yeah, I just feel I feel very honoured that you asked me. So
Oh,
thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much. I try to make everybody feel relaxed, and that's why I give you everything up front. I want everybody, no surprises. I did sneak a couple of questions in there that were not on the list. That's usually what happens. Because some responses generate obviously another question.
Yeah.
But because I don't want anybody to feel like there's going to be a surprise, or so I feel like it makes everyone more relaxed if they know,
Yeah.
what's going to be asked of them.
Yeah.
Well, I am going to let you go now, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
I actually, we have a New England group of Sanditon sisters. I'm sure that you heard of the Sanditon Sisterhood, that are getting together for a luncheon at a historic inn tomorrow. So, and it's going to be, I'm just going to take everything within my power not to tell them about my conversation with you tomorrow.
So nobody knows yet. They won't find out till Wednesday.
They will not find out until Wednesday. We're going to give them some teasers. Know that they are going to love every single second of it, because you were amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
And you too.
Thank
And
you.
and a big hello and lots of love to the Sanditon sisters.
Oh, thank you. They're going to love that.
and
I'm
keep
gonna
me informed in what they're up to. I definitely would love to know, what's happening. I mean, I know we're thousands of miles away, but yes, I'd
yes.
great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Right, bye bye.